Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another video for the new Boston. Now, in this tutorial we're going to be looking at incrementing a value in a database by grabbing the value and updating it. And we're going to do this in the way of a hit counter, and it's going to be a unique hit counter. We're also going to have another table, despite the one where we're counting a single value. We're incrementing a single value. We're going to have a table that's going to store the IP address of the users that are visited. This is a very sort of loose way to do it, but it's just going to give you an idea of updating and everything like that. But we're going to keep a track of the users that are visited, so if the user has visited, we're not going to increment the value. So it's basically a unique hit counter, but using what we've already learned with SQL and SQL statements, or queries rather. So we've already got this food table, but we're going to ignore that for now because that was from the last tutorial. What we want to now do is create a new table, and I'm going to call this hits count, hits_count. Now this is going to be a single field table. We're going to have one field on it, and this is going to just be an integer starting from 0. And we're going to work our way up as we refresh the page, as long as our IP address doesn't exist in another table, which is what we're going to create in a minute. So if we click go, the field we're specifying is going to be called count. It's an integer. We're going to set it as the primary key because technically it is a unique value. However, we don't need an auto increment because we're going to be specifying this value anyway. We could put auto increment, that would be a lot easier, but it would avoid the point of teaching you perhaps how this can work another way. So the quick and easy way would be to click auto increment, but what we're going to do is we're going to grab the current value and then add 1 to it and then increment. So we're going the long way around things, but it's going to allow you to practice a lot more. Okay, so we need to save this. Let's just go down and save that. So we've created this table with this count value here. If we browse the table at the moment, we've got nothing in. So what we're going to do is initially we're going to need to set this value to 0 by clicking insert, entering 0 and clicking go. You can now see that when we browse, we've got count equal to 0. Now within PHP, we're not going to do anything else in MySQL with regards to this. In PHP, we're going to grab this value, add 1 and then reinsert it into here, or update it rather. So we need another table now, and that's going to be called hits IP, and this is going to be a list of the IP addresses that have accessed the site. So again, we just need one field, and this is going to be IP. We don't need to set this to a primary key. This is going to be a varchar. Now if you think about an IP address, let's just go to here. We've got a possibility of this amount of characters in an IP address. So we've got 3 here, then 6, 9, 12 in length. Add the 3 dots is 13, 14 and 15. So we need it to be 15 characters or less. And we're not going to set that to primary. It'll give us a warning that we haven't set it to primary, but that doesn't matter. So no index defined here, but that's okay. So IP address is going to be stored in here in a long list, and our hit counts are going to be stored in here. Now there are other ways to do this. Obviously we could just have a method to store the IP addresses and then count the amount of IP addresses or unique IP addresses that were present using the MySQL numRows function, and that's going to work in exactly the same way. So there's loads of possibilities to create this, but like I said, I'm just going the long way around things so we learn a bit better. So back to PHP, we're not really going to do much more in phpMyAdmin now. I'm going to first of all include or require this connect file that we've created earlier on in the tutorials. If you haven't already seen that, I suggest you do so if you don't know how to connect to a database. So we've connected to our database and we're requiring this within our page. So if it's not there, we're not going to run the page. Simple enough. The next thing we need to do is grab the user IP, and I'm going to put this into a variable called user IP. So remember, we're using $_server, and then we need a remote address in there with the address shortened. There's another tutorial on this as well if you haven't already learned how to do this. So we've created a variable called user IP. Let's just echo that out. This is just to check that we're getting a value back correctly. Okay, so don't seem to be getting a value back. Oh, it's because we haven't saved the file, so that would help. Let's refresh. Okay, so I've got my local IP address being returned to me. We can test it just with this. So what's going to happen is I'm going to refresh the page, the hit counter is going to go up, my IP address is going to be stored, then the next time I refresh we're going to check for my IP. If my IP does exist in the database, or in the table rather, we're not going to update the count, but if it doesn't, again, we are. So it's essentially like a file-based hit counter like we've already discussed in some of the other tutorials. If you haven't seen that and you want to look at that, then you can go back and view them. But now we're using databases instead. Okay, so we're going to be using two functions within our program. I'm going to predefine these functions out. I'm going to write a skeleton, if you like, of these functions, and then we're going to fill them in at a later date. So the first function is going to be called IP exists, and the argument we're going to give this is IP. So we're going to be specifying the IP address into this function. So it's going to look something like this. And obviously this variable here is going to be user IP. So that's our first function. Our next function is going to be, let's just say update count. And this is going to take no arguments because all we're doing is incrementing the value by 1. That's simple enough. Now, because we've declared this user IP outside of our functions, we need to create a global of these inside. So we're saying global user IP. That's going to allow us to use this IP address outside there. Sorry, we don't need to do that in this function, but we do in this function, because we need to get the IP and we need to compare it to the user's IP that's been specified. So let's just echo out user IP and check that that works within that function. So IP exists, and let's just give this a value of 1, and we can refresh. Now you can see that it's still being echoed out. However, if I was to remove this global keyword and just try and echo out user IP, you can see it doesn't work, because we need to make this globally usable inside of our function. So now that we've got that sorted, we're not going to run into any errors later on in our program. Update count doesn't need to take anything for now, but we need to make user IP global for this function. The first function we're going to be working on is the update count, because this is probably the most simplest. All we need to do is run a function to grab the value, or a query rather, to grab the value from the database. We then need to grab this or add 1 to this and then insert it into the database, or update the count field. So let's go back to hits count so we can work with this. So count at the moment is equal to 0. So the first thing we're going to focus on doing is grabbing this value. So let's create a query, and it's just text for now. We're going to run the query in a moment so we can see if the query's worked or not. So I'm going to say select count from hits count. That's it. So let's put these in with apostrophes around them so we can see it better. So now we can run the query. So query run equals MySQL query. Remember, we're using this function and we're just putting the text that we've defined our query up here. So this query should work because we know that it's working. So let's run the page. Let's first of all call this function. Okay, let's go back to our page and see if we have any errors. Okay, we don't, but I want to make sure we don't run into any errors, so I want to say if, and I'm going to enclose this in brackets, then we continue. Okay, if not, we want to say die, and we want to say, in fact, we won't use die because this can sometimes interfere with the template of your website. For example, if you were including this at the top of your website, you're not going to want to kill the rest of the page just because the query is not working. So for now, we're going to leave this out. At the moment, we've just got an if statement. We haven't got an if-else statement. So all we're doing is we're saying if this query works, then run it. Otherwise, just be silent. We're not going to say anything to the user. But we could test it from now, I suppose, and we could say die, and then we can put MySQL error in there. And this is a great method for debugging as well. If you're not sure about your queries and you want to add this in for now, let's say you were to add, say, an extra comma in there or something, and to refresh, you get the error back. But like I said before, if we get rid of this and then we put an and just before this, an @ sign, sorry, just before this, and we refresh, we don't get an error back, we're just silent about it. So let's get rid of that now. So presuming our query has run, we've checked that our query's run, we need to get the value returned from this query. And we can do this using the MySQL result function. So I'm going to say count equals MySQL result. Now there's a few arguments we need to pass through to this. The first one is the query that's been run, so that's query run, and the second one is the row that we want to receive, get the value from. Now obviously we've only got one row, and we're only ever going to have one row. We're not inserting more than one row, we're just updating this single row here. So remember, this is the row here and this is the field name down here, the column, so row and column. So we've got count equal to 0 at the moment. It's on the 0 row, so the first row is the 0 row, because remember we start at 0 when we're counting. So we've got 0, so we type 0 in there. And lastly, we need to specify the field name, which is count. So I can just write count in there. So now the value count, this here, is equal to 0. So let's echo count out to see what happens. So update count function is now going to give us a 0 back. So let's just change this inside of our database to make sure that everything's working. Let's just give this a value of, say, 21. We can go back to our page, refresh, and we get this value back. So we know that everything's working properly. Let's just change this back to 0. Click go. Okay, so back to 0. Now that we've got this count variable, we can create a new variable called count inc, and that is going to be equal to count plus 1. Otherwise we could say count plus plus, but for now I just want to create a new variable to keep things simple. So count inc equals count plus 1. So now what we've got is we've got the original value, which is 0. Ooh, let me just click back to here. We've got the original value, which is equal to 0. Then we've got the new value, which is equal to 1 now, because our original value is 0. So now what we need to do inside here is perform another query to update this value. So again, we say query. You can say query to or query update equals. So we're saying update count. Oh no, sorry, we're saying update hits count set count equal to, and this is just going to be our count inc value. So count inc. So we can also enclose this in single quotation marks. So update hits count, so update this table. That's not enough information. Now we need to say what we want to set. So we're setting count, which is equal to, let's just go down this here, set this value to count inc, which is now equal to 1 because we've refreshed. So now we can run this query. So query update run equals MySQL query. Remember, we require this function to actually process our query. So just doing this isn't enough. So and that is query update. And now we can use exactly the same structure here, and we can say if, and enclose this in brackets, if query update run equals, so if that runs, then we're going to echo out OK for now, but we don't actually need to do that. So I mean, eventually we're not going to need this if statement. We just need the query update, and we can put an @ sign in front of it. But for our purposes now, we're going to check if this query has been successfully executed. So let's go back to our table and back here, so we know that we're definitely on 0, so our count is on 0 at the moment. Now with everything I've explained, this should, when we refresh the page, call this function. We're calling the update count function down here, and it should update the value and increment it by 1. So let's refresh, and we've got an OK value back here. Let's go back to PHP My Admin and click Browse, and you can now see that count is equal to 1. So let's refresh a couple more times. 2, 3, 4. So now our count should equal to 4. So we've successfully created our function to update the count value. However, what we need to do now is we need to check whether the our IP address already exists in the table, but we haven't actually input our IP address into the table yet, so we need to do that first. So let's change this back to 0. Okay, so let's not call this update count function for now. Now what we've got now is a function that's going to work. Let's just get rid of this if statement. It's not required at all. We just are updating the query there, and if it doesn't work, we're silencing this anyway, so because it doesn't really matter anyway. Okay, so we've created our function which is update the count. That works, and we can use that later on to update the count if this function returns true, so if the IP address does exist. So let's first of all, up here, every time our page is run, we want to store the user's, oh no, sorry, okay, so update count is fine. We've got IP exists, and we also want a function. I didn't think this through properly, obviously. We need IP add, and this is going to add an IP address to our database. So again, we're taking in IP, and okay, yeah, so IP add. So we need to add an IP address to our table. Our table is, just refresh this to blank that. Our table is hits IP, and our field is IP. So what we want to do is we want to first of all create a query, and this is going to be equal to insert, in capitals, insert into, and our table name is hits IP. Insert into IP values, and we only have one value, so that's it. Values is the IP that we specify in here, so that can just be IP like that. Now we come down and we say query run equals MySQL query. Okay, so let's just first of all get rid of that, and we need to call this function. So what we're doing is down here we're calling the function, we're saying IP add, and the IP that we want to specify is the user IP. So we call this function, the user IP, which we've grabbed from our server data, is transferred through to this function and is added to the database, because we're taking this argument here and putting it in here. Okay, so user IP is added to a database. Now let's check if this was working. Let's go back and refresh. Okay, let's go into browse, and you can see that our IP address has been added. Okay, so we also have a problem here in the fact that a duplicate entry might exist, so we might have two of the same IP address in here. However, we're going to do this later on in our if statements. We're only going to add an IP if it doesn't already exist in the database, and that's what we have. Let's just delete this function. That's what we have this function IP exists for. Now remember, we got the global user IP from here, so we're accessing this IP address from outside the function. Now we need to, well, I've added the IP into the IP address, so now we can check if it's there or not. So we're going to perform the check first of all while it is in there, then we're going to perform the check after I've manually deleted it. So IP exists. First thing we need to do is create a query, and the query is select IP from, and we can put these in there, select IP from hits IP where IP is equal to user IP. Now let's run this function and then I'll explain a bit about what we're doing, or what we're going to do. Okay, so this function is going to select an IP address, which we don't need to do. We could have selected star, but I've just specified it, from the hits table where we've already got one IP address, which is 127.0.0.1, where the IP equals my current IP address. Now what we can do is we run the query and we can return the amount of rows returned. Now if the rows returned is equal to 1, this means that the address already exists in the database. If we return a 0 rows, so no rows, then the IP address doesn't. And remember, we do this using the MySQL numRows function. So we say if MySQL numRows of query that we've run, so query run, equals 0, then we need to return true. Remember, we're taking a return value of true, so we can use this function later in an if statement. Else, if MySQL numRows query run equals 1, return, in fact I've got these the wrong way around, so if it does equal 0, return false. If it equals 1, return true. So if we get a value back, then we're returning true, so the IP address already exists. Now this is slightly flawed. What if the same IP address exists in the database? Now we could say is greater than or equal to 1, which would be better. We don't need to do this because our processing later on in the program is going to allow us to only add the IP address if it already exists or if it doesn't exist. So if MySQL numRows query run equals 0, return false, the IP address does not exist. Else, if MySQL numRows of query run are greater than or equal to 1, then we return true because the IP address does exist. Now there's a faster way to do this, because what we need to do is we're running the MySQL numRows function twice, so we're slowing down the speed of our program very slightly, but significantly in terms of if you had lots of SQL, you'd be overloading a server. So I'm going to say query numRows equals, I'm just going to take this here and put it into a variable in itself. So we're only running this once, and then what we can do is delete this as well and say query numRows query numRows. That's just a little tip for when you're using lots and lots of things like this. Don't include these in if statements or anywhere else or in any loops. Create them in a separate variable first. So now let's check if this works. So down here we can say if IP exists, and then we specify a user IP in here, do something, otherwise do something else. So if IP exists, remember we're supplying user ID, this will be equal to 127.0.0.1. If it exists, echo exists, otherwise echo doesn't exist. I've used my escaping character there because I've used a single quotation mark inside a single quotation mark. Let's refresh the page and see what happens. Exists. Now this is telling me that my current IP exists in the database, which it does. Now let's delete that from there manually. Come back to the page and refresh, and it says doesn't exist. So our program is working. This if statement here, we've used the use of a function, so we haven't had to program anything before it other than functions, and this is creating our code to look a lot tidier, a lot neater, and it's going to work a lot more efficiently when we're looking at it and producing the final code. So now we've got everything we need. All we need to do is we need to perform this if statement and we need to just say if the IP doesn't exist, then increase the counter. So we can just use the exclamation mark before this function. If IP doesn't exist, we can just echo out this will now add count plus 1. So now what we can say is refresh. This will now add count plus 1 because our IP address is not in the table. So obviously we're not going to be echoing this out, that's just to represent what's going to happen. So our IP address doesn't exist. What do we need to do? We need to add the IP address and update the count. So all we simply do is update count and add IP. Or is it IP add? Yeah. IP add user IP. And that's it. This line has incorporated our this piece of code rather, has incorporated our 3 functions, and it's put them, it's first of all made a check using a function, then it's updated the count using a function, and then it's added our IP address. So now let's check if this works. I'm going to add just a header down here just to make everything look pretty. Well, not pretty, but just so we know that there's content on our page. So let's look at the database. Hits count currently is equal to 0, and hits IP currently doesn't have any rows in. You can see that I've got this like red little white arrow with a red circle around it. So now let's refresh the page. We've got my page up. Now, because my IP doesn't already exist in the database, we should have updated the count and added my IP in, ready for the next check when I come onto the page again. So hits IP, we can see that we've got my IP address being inserted into the database, and hits count will be updated by 1. Now let's refresh the page again. That's done. Let's return here. Hits count is still equal to 1, and my IP address is already in the database. So what we've done is we've used 3 different functions, so we've kept our code nice and tidy, and what we've then done is we've checked if an IP exists, we've created some code or some SQL to insert an IP, and we've also created some code to update the count value. Now, like I said before, this isn't the quickest and easiest way to do this, but the amount of time we've spent developing certain parts of it means that you know exactly how to do things the long way round. Therefore, when it comes to working the short way round, you'll be absolutely fine handling it. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is another video tutorial for the New Boston. Now, in this tutorial, we're going to be looking at the left join inside of SQL statements. Now, we've already looked at basically taking data from our database. However, what happens when we have, say, a table called people? We've got a column called ID, and we've got a column called name here, or a field called ID and a field called name, and each person is assigned an ID. So this is an auto-incrementing primary key field. We've got 1 representing Alex and 2 representing Dale. We've also got a table called pets. Now, inside pets we have 3 fields, and the first one's ID, which just corresponds to an auto-incrementing primary key, so each record is unique. We've also got people underscore ID. Now, people underscore ID corresponds to each person in the people database. So rather than having a name in here, we're using the unique identifier of each person. So 1 is Alex and 2 is Dale. So let's go over to pets and interpret this. What we're essentially saying in this table is that Alex has a pet cat and Alex has a pet fish, because we've got people ID 1 and 1. And we're also saying Dale has a dog. Okay, so we've got 1 representing Alex and 2 representing Dale, and we've got an entry called cat, fish and dog, where cat belongs to Alex, fish belongs to Alex, and dog belongs to Dale. Okay, so ignore this ID here for now in this column. All we need to focus on is people ID, pet, obviously, because this is what we're going to be echoing out, or retrieving rather, and also in the people table we've got an ID of 1 for Alex and an ID of 2 for Dale. So hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, rewind the video and have another look. Now, what are we going to be doing? So it's fair enough we've got all this data, but what we want to do is we want to join results so we can echo out who has what pet. At the moment they're stored in separate tables. Let me just talk to you about why they're stored in separate tables. When you're working in PHP, you're going to most likely want to reference someone's name with their ID. So therefore, by storing it as an ID here, we can use an inner join statement, or sorry, a left join in this case, to identify values that exist in this table here, in this people table. We're going to say 1 and 2 is going to match this here. So we're going to echo out, essentially we're going to echo out in the end Alex twice with the cat and fish and dog. So Alex is going to be replaced by 1, 1 and 2 is going to be replaced by Dale. So let's have a look at the SQL query and how we might do this. So we'll run through this and then we'll have a look at the results. Now it's slightly different, so when we're accessing different tables data, when we're doing our select query, so we're going to say select, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to do something dot something, and we do this because we can reference it from a particular table. So we might say select people dot name. Let's just open up this in a new tab so we can see what's going on. So we want to say people, so the table is called people, and dot name, so it's people dot name, so it's from the people table and the field name. And we also want to select from the pets table. Let's just open this up. We want to select pets dot pet. So essentially what we want to be displaying will be written here. So we want to display the people, from the people table we want to display the name, and from the pets table we want to display pet, which is the name of the pet. Now we want to say from people. So we want to inner join, we want to left join, so we want to join this pets table onto this where the left column exists, or the left data exists in the right. So we want to say where this ID here is equal to this people ID here. So we do this in a slightly odd way. So we say from people, we say left join, and the table we want to join, so pets, we want to join pets, so select from people, left join pets, and then we want to say on, and this is the condition that it's on. So the condition is that the ID here, ID 1 or 2, matches people ID. So we can come back and we can say on people dot ID is equal to pets dot people ID. So we're saying on the condition that people dot ID, which is here, is equal to pets people ID. So inside the pets table, people ID. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this just in case we lose, or copy this rather to the clipboard, and we'll click go. Now you can see that what it's done is it's returned the name column or field if you like, and the pets. And what we've actually got here is Alex owns a cat, Alex owns a fish, and Dale owns a dog. So we've taken data from two different tables and joined it, but by only using one SQL statement. Now why would we want to do this? Well, we could, in PHP we could say loop through, and then within a loop we could do another query looking for this ID and then represent that data. The reason we don't do this is it slows everything down. By just using one query as opposed to two queries, you've already halved the processing time of them queries as a whole. So it's obviously a lot better to only use one query rather than using two different queries. And we don't just have left join, we have right join and inner join as well. So we can use these in different ways, and I'll be explaining that in other tutorials. But for now, this is the left join and how we're going to use it. So if you ever have data in another table that's represented by say an ID from another table, then you now know to use left join to basically join two tables. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial for the new Boston. Now in the last example we've looked at left joining, where we return, let's give you an example in the SQL tab. We have said left join pets on where people.id equals pets.peopleid. So if we click go, we're given a list of people on this hand side and the pets that relate to them on this hand side. So we've got two different tables: people, where we've got the ID, which is unique to each person, and we've got pets, where we're ignoring the ID for now, but people ID is 1 for Alex and 2 for Dale. So we're just displaying this information. Now what happens if, for example, we have got dog, which is relative to 2, people ID 2, which is Dale, but we delete Dale from the database. So let's delete Dale from the database. Let's go ahead and run this query again and click go. Now you can see that it's not returned, it's only returned Alex and cat and fish, because Dale now doesn't exist. Now what happens if we want to display data on the right hand side, even if the corresponding value on the left hand side doesn't exist? Now for this we use the right join. We've used left join, but if we change this to right join, what we're now doing is, even if this people ID doesn't exist, we're still displaying it because we're right joining. So let's click go and see what result we achieve. Okay, so we've got pet, cat, fish and dog. Dog still exists in the database in this table pets, but the owner does not exist now in people. So why is this useful? Why can we use this right join? Well, in this case it doesn't really make too much sense, unless we were saying, you know, the dog is now, I don't know, homeless and it's been abandoned. The user no longer exists. So it could be a pet owner's website, for example. This user might unregister, unregister, so they might delete their account, and now dog is left homeless. So that's just an example, a silly example, but I'm sure you can understand where this is going. So for if we want to represent the data on the left, even if it doesn't have a value on the right, we use the left join. If we want to represent the data on the right hand side, even if it doesn't have a value that corresponds to it, after the on keyword on the left hand side, we still show this. So we've shown this as null. So inside PHP we can make this comparison and say that dog doesn't actually have an owner. So that's basically the difference between the left and the right hand side joins. So we use left join if we want to display data on the left, even if it doesn't exist on the right, and vice versa. With the right join we display data on the right, even if it doesn't exist on the left. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another video for the new Boston. Now, in the last tutorial we looked at left join, and I used left join for this example where we were returning a name with a pet on the end. So we're saying down here where the result was from this query, we've said Alex has a cat, Alex has a fish and Dale has a dog. Now what happens if we go into pets here and we're going to delete the entry for Dale? So people ID 2 was Dale. Let's go ahead and delete that. And let's run this query again. Let's paste it in there and we'll click go. Now you'll see that we've returned Dale and null next to pet. So this is useful, the left join is useful for returning the name of the person, because the table we used on the left was the name, even if there are no values in pet. So what we've essentially done here is said, even if there are no entries in the right table, which is pet, still return the name of the left hand side table, which is name. Now the reason this is useful is because in PHP, if we were to run this, we'd need to know if the user had no pets at all. This would save us using PHP num rows, because we would just say if the pet equals null, then obviously this user has no pets whatsoever. So we've used the left join for this. Now what happens if we were to use join on its own? So let's go into SQL tab and let's go and paste this in here. Now instead of using left join, I'm going to just use join. Let's click go and see how this differs. Now you'll see that we've removed the result Dale. The reason that we've removed the result Dale is because we're using the join, which will only return values that equal or that are found based on this on here. So we're saying if people ID equals pets.peopleid, so we're returning using the join only values that exist in each table. So we're not saying does it only exist in the left table or does it only exist in the right table. We're saying does it exist in both tables. So now what we're doing is we're only returning the data where the left table matches the right table. So why could this be useful? Well, we might want to, inside of our PHP program eventually, when we're executing this query or running this SQL query, we might want to say we only want values where someone actually has a pet. Whereas before in the left join we looked at where Dale didn't have a pet, we want to just say with the join only return results where user has a pet, or where name has a pet, the person has a pet. So in this case we've returned 2 rows where Alex has a cat and Alex has a fish. So now you can see the use of the join on its own as opposed to the left join where we're returning a value even if the user on the or the user doesn't have a value in the right hand table. So this on is really important because what we're doing is we're making the comparison at this point. So the comparison could be any operator, but for now it's people.id equals pets.peopleid. So we're matching from the left and the right, and if we don't match we're not returning the values with the join. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a PHP video tutorial for the New Boston. Now in this tutorial we're going to be looking at the SQL like condition. So we've already established a connection to our database. We can just include this file in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a database with a few names in the in a table. So we're going to create a table, sorry. We've already got our database called a database. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a table called names, and this is going to have 2 fields. We're going to create a standard ID field as we've already looked at. So we're going to have an ID field and we're going to have a name field. Now the ID field is obviously going to be of type int because it's going to be an auto increment integer. So we need to select auto increment. This just ensures that every time we insert a value, a record, this value is incremented. And we're going to create the index as primary because this is a unique field. So the name can be a varchar 40 depending on the name length. This is just for example purposes, so I'd probably recommend something smaller. However, we'll just do this for this tutorial. Let's go down and click save. Okay, so our table's been created. You can see it here and you can see the structure of our table here. Let's go ahead and insert some names. So I'm going to insert Alex Garrett, and down here I'm going to uncheck ignore, and I'm going to type, let's say, Alex Malcolm. Let's go down and click go. Okay, let's insert a couple more records. So let's say Dale Garrett, and we'll say Billy Garrett as well. So all we're doing really is we're inserting a few bits of dummy data so we can test this SQL like condition. Now let me just talk a bit about the like condition. The like condition can be used on its own as like, or it can be used not to like. So we can search either for where something is like something or where something is not like something. And we can also use a wildcard. So if, for example, we were to search in this table here that we've created for Alex, and we had a wildcard on the right hand side, this would return all values that started with or had the beginning text of Alex. So you'll see how it works a bit later on. For example, if we had Malcolm and the wildcard was on the left hand side, you'd see it would bring back anything with text on one side and Malcolm on this side. So we can use the wildcard on either side as well to return an exact value. Well, no, not an exact value, but for example, if we were to search for X space G and the wildcard was on either side, we're searching within our string as a whole. So X and G would return this result. For example, if we were just searching for G, it would return this result, this result, and this result, because there's no G in Alex Malcolm, but there is a G existing in all of these. So the most common one when we're searching fields would be to use a wildcard at either side. We can also use an underscore to search for a specific character. So for example, if we were to say it's like Alex and then underscore ARRETT, it would search for all every record with ALEX space, then any character, then ARRETT. But I'll be demonstrating this within MySQL, or PHP MyAdmin, sorry. So let's go ahead and create an SQL statement for this, or a query rather. So I'm going to say select name from names where, and we need to pick a field, so this is going to be obviously name, where name like, and then inside our single quotation marks we can put our wildcard in, or our underscore, whatever we wish to do. So for now I'm just going to say wildcard Garrett, for example. Okay, so let's copy and paste this so we can use it again. I'm going to click go and see what we return. So we've got every record where the surname essentially equals Garrett, because our wildcard was on the left, so any text here and the word Garrett on the right hand side. So let's go back and let's change this around. So let's put the wildcard now on this side. Now this isn't going to return any values because Garrett is at the end of every field value. So you can see that MySQL returned an empty result set. So now let's go ahead and search for Billy, for example. So Billy on the left hand side, and then a wildcard for the rest of the content. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Click on go, and you can see it returns Billy Garrett. So you can see how we can chop and change this wildcard around in order to produce specific results from specific places, and basically using the wildcard. So now let's take this example of this. Now let's search for G, and our wildcard is on either side. So G can be contained anywhere in our field name. So let's click go. You can see it's returned Alex Garrett, Dale Garrett and Billy Garrett, but it hasn't returned Alex Malcolm, because Alex Malcolm doesn't contain a G anywhere in it. So if you were to create, say, a search feature in PHP, which we'll be doing a bit later on in the tutorial, and you were to be searching for a name, you would probably use the wildcard on either side, because if the user was to search for Alex, for example, and they were to click go, you could see that they're produced with all results that the first name is Alex, or Alex is found anywhere in this string. Now if they were to search for, say, Alex Garrett on its own, then they'll automatically be returned with the value that equals Alex Garrett, because the wildcard is on either side, leaving the middle content as the result found. So now we can also do say where not like. So where not like G, as I explained before, the only result with the wildcard on either side and G that wasn't returned was Alex Malcolm. So this essentially reverses our condition. So if we click go, we're given the result Alex Malcolm. Okay, so that's using the not keyword with the like, or the not operator with the like condition. What we can also do is we can say like, and we can specify an underscore. So like I said before, we could say where like equals Alex, and then we could say G underscore ARRETT. Sorry, no, there. So wherever like is this, and then we fill in somewhere with the G. So let's click go, copy and paste this in first, the clipboard, and you can see we've returned Alex Garrett. So we can see that we can either search using a wildcard on either side, or we can use the underscore to specify exactly the character or the amount of characters. So we can double up this, we can double or triple up this underscore. So we could say that as well. Let's click go. You can see that that's also returned Alex Garrett. So you can use an underscore to search for a specific character as well. So now let's put this into practice. We want to, inside PHP, create a small search engine, if you like, that's going to search these names. So what our user is going to do is they're going to be presented with a text area, or a text box rather, an input field where they can input a name, and then they can be returned the results based on what they've typed in. So let's go ahead and connect to our database first of all. We have this connect.inc.php which we've used in previous examples. So let's go ahead and require that into our code. Okay, so let's double check that everything's working by refreshing. We've connected to our database successfully. Now let's come down and before we actually start on the PHP code, we'll create the form. So form action equals and method equals something. So the method is post and the action, we're going back to index.php. So it's basic form submission. If you don't already know how to do this, then there are tutorials on it from myself and other people. So we want name, and then we're giving the user an area to type in a name. So the text, the input type is text, and the name we're going to say search underscore name. Let's also give them a submit button that they can press when they're finished. So value equals, and we could say search in this case, I guess. Okay, so now what we need to do is pick this value up from PHP. So let's just double check that everything works. We've got our name, we've got a text area here where we can type a name to search. We can click search and that submits straight back to index.php. So let's go ahead and check if the form has been submitted first of all. Then we're going to check whether the search name field is empty or not. And then after that, we're going to actually process our query inside of our database. So let's go ahead and say if is set $_post, remember we're using post data down here, and we're going to say search name. So we're corresponding this to the name that we've given the element in our HTML document. So if this is true, we're going to run this block, and inside this block we're going to set a variable called search underscore name to the value of what's been posted, because otherwise if we specify this outside of our if statement before we've checked if the form has been submitted, we're going to have an undefined index error or an undefined variable error. So we've put this into a variable so we can use this later on in our code and we don't have to keep referencing back to this. Now let's check if this isn't empty. So if not empty, and we're specifying the search name in here, if it's not empty then do something else. So basically what's going to happen is, let's just echo out an OK message there. Let's come back to our code, let's type in nothing, so we click nothing, or we click submit without anything in being, and then nothing happens. If we type a value and click search, we get an OK message back there. So now we need to start constructing our query. So I'm going to create a new variable called query, and this is going to equal our SQL query that we're going to execute or run inside of our database. So we're going to say select, and we're saying select name from, remember our table is called names. We've already connected to our database, a database here. Remember these values must correspond to your login credentials and also the database that you're using. Let's take a look here. So we've got the names as the database, so we're selecting the name from names, so select name from names, where name like, and now we can do what we've been doing inside our SQL tab in PHP and we can look at the most sensible search option in this case would be to have a wildcard either side, so we can put search name in here. Now remember we need to think about security for this, so let's append this on. Let's get that outside of here. So what we've done is we've just closed our string data here and appended on the search name and then appended on the rest of our string data. Let's enclose this in MySQL real escape string to ensure that SQL injection can't take place in this instance. We're just protecting against it as much as we can for now. So now what we want to do is we want to run the query. So query run is equal to MySQL query query. So now that we've run the query, we should have returned a value based on what the user has actually typed in. So say the user typed in Alex, we'd search for a wildcard either side of Alex, and it could return, well, it will return Alex Garrett and Alex Malcolm. So let's go ahead and check how many results we have got back. So what we can do is we can say if MySQL num rows, and we're going to feed this in the query. So this function is basically counting the amount of rows that we're returned by this query. So if they're greater than or equal to 1, then do something. So we want to say display the results. Otherwise this means that no results have been found, so we can just echo no results found. Up here for now, we're just going to write echo found. We're not going to display the data now, but we're just going to test that our query is actually working. So let's go ahead and type in a name that's not in this database. So we could type Craig in, for example. Click search. No results found. If we type Alex and click search, found. So we know that our query works now because we have data inside of our database that would correspond to Alex with the wildcard either side. Let's go ahead and type in Garrett. Click search. Now let's go ahead and type in Garr and click search. That's found. Now let's go ahead and type in, for example, Josh. Click search, and no results found. So we know that our query is working. Now what we can do is work to show this data. So we're going to use a while loop. This is going to loop through all the records that have been found and put them into an associative array. And by an associative array, I mean an array with the field name as the key. So we're referencing each returned row by the key itself, so the data we want to receive from this. So I'm going to say query row equals MySQL fetch associative array. This stands for associative anyway, and we're putting the query that we've already run inside here. So this function here is grabbing the data as an associative array, and we're putting it inside query row. Therefore, inside our while statement, our while loop, we can echo out this specific data. So we can echo out query row. Remember, we're using an array, so we use square brackets here. Now this corresponds to the row, the field name that you want to show. So I would just want to show the name. So I'm just going to type name into here. We're going to append a line break on the end just to keep things nice and neat and tidy. And what we can do is, if it is greater than 1, we can echo up here, say results found. And what we can also do is we can echo out the number of results found. So let's take this. I'll demonstrate the way the program's working at the moment, and then we can make that slight modification. So let's go and refresh the page. Okay, so I'm going to type in Alex and click search. You can see that results found Alex Garrett and Alex Malcolm. Now let's search for Garrett and click search. You can see that we've found everyone with the surname Garrett. Now let's just type in Dale, click search. We can see we've found one result. Let's type Garr, again everyone with that. Let's type in A, and you see we've received all results because every result has an A in it, or every record has an A in it. Now we can protect against this. You could, for example, say if the query string is smaller than a length of 4, which is what most applications do, they don't allow you to search for data that's under, say, 4 characters, because you'll return too many results. So let's just go ahead and do that. So if empty search name, so inside here we're going to say if strlen search name is greater than or smaller than, we can say, or is greater than or equal to 5, or 4, we'll say, greater than or equal to 4, then execute all this code. Let's find where got 1, 2 closing, so we'll put that there, and then we're going to indent all of this. So essentially what I've just done is I've added in another if statement saying if the string length of search name, so we're using the string length function of search name, is greater than or equal to 4, then we can run all this code. Then otherwise we echo your keyword must be 5 characters or more. So now if we try to say Alex, this is going to work because it is greater than or equal to. If we would say A now and click search, your keyword must be 5 characters or more. So we're now coming into more of a search engine based tutorial, I guess. There's a couple of more things we need to address, or one more thing that we need to address, and that is how many results that are found. So I'm going to go ahead and take out this here, and I'm going to put it into a new variable called query num rows. So now what I can do is I can substitute this in here, query num rows, and we can also echo out here query num rows dot space and results found. So this is going to say a number
and this is the same number as well, so we're using this variable. That's why I took it out and popped it into this variable here, and we're appending on a space and then results found. So let's go ahead and type in Alex, click search, 2 results found. It's displaying 2 results. Now let's go ahead and type in Garrett, and you can see that 3 results are found and it's displaying. So this is the like condition in PHP. Like I said, you can use this with underscores to represent specific characters, so we're filling in the blanks for specific characters, and also we can use our wildcards on the left, right hand side, or on either side of our value that we're trying to match to. So we've created a little program that searched for names. You can use this to search for absolutely any data. You just need to take into account what I've said and represent the field names with the names that you want to search with. So this function here is grabbing the data as an associative array, and we're putting it inside query row. Therefore, inside our while statement, our while loop, we can echo out this specific data. So we can echo out query row. Remember, we're using an array, so we use square brackets here. Now this corresponds to the row, the field name that you want to show. So I just want to show the name. So I'm just going to type name into here. We're going to append a line break on the end just to keep things nice and neat and tidy. And what we can do is, if it is greater than 1, we can echo up here, say results found. And what we can also do is we can echo out the number of results found. So let's take this. I'll demonstrate the way the program's working at the moment, and then we can make that slight modification. So let's go and refresh the page. Okay, so I'm going to type in Alex and click search. You can see that results found Alex Garrett and Alex Malcolm. Now let's search for Garrett and click search. You can see that we've found everyone with the surname Garrett. Now let's just type in Dale, click search. We can see we've found 1 result. Let's type Garr, again everyone with that. Let's type in A, and you see we've received all results because every result has an A in it, or every record has an A in it. Now we can protect against this. You could, for example, say if the query string is smaller than a length of 4, which is what most applications do. They don't allow you to search for data that's under, say, 4 characters, because you'll return too many results. So let's just go ahead and do that. So if empty search name, so inside here we're going to say if strlen search name is greater than or smaller than, we can say is greater than or equal to 5, or 4, we'll say, greater than or equal to 4, then execute all this code. Let's find where the got 1, 2 closing, so we'll put that there, and then we're going to indent all of this. So essentially what I've just done is I've added in another if statement saying if the string length of search name, so we're using the string length function of search name, is greater than or equal to 4, then we can run all this code. Then otherwise we echo your keyword must be 5 characters or more. So now if we try to say Alex, this is going to work because it is greater than or equal to. If we would say A now and click search, your keyword must be 5 characters or more. So we're now coming into more of a search engine based tutorial, I guess. There's a couple of more things we need to address, or one more thing that we need to address, and that is how many results that are found. So I'm going to go ahead and take out this here, and I'm going to put it into a new variable called query num rows. So now what I can do is I can substitute this in here, query num rows, and we can also echo out here query num rows dot space and results found. So this is going to say a number, and this is the same number as well, so we're using this variable. That's why I took it out and popped it into this variable here, and we're appending on a space and then results found. So let's go ahead and type in Alex, click search, 2 results found. It's displaying 2 results. Now let's go ahead and type in Garrett, and you can see that 3 results are found and it's displaying. So this is the like condition in PHP. Like I said, you can use this with underscores to represent specific characters, so we're filling in the blanks for specific characters, and also we can use our wildcards on the left, right hand side, or on either side of our value that we're trying to match to. So we've created a little program that searched for names. You can use this to search for absolutely any data. You just need to take into account what I've said and represent the field names with the names that you want to search with.